May 1940, Gamelin's command was made up of 4 operational areas. The most important of these was in the northeast, facing Germany. Gamelin retained direct control of planning and strategy, leaving his frontline commanders in charge of operations and liaising with each other. It was a desperately flawed command structure, characterized by inefficient coordination and communication. To make matters worse, Gamelin had fallen out with his key commanders. The BEF commander, Lord John Gort, was disturbed by the blatant weakness of the French command structure, but as he was subordinate to Gamelin, he could do little about it. Gamelin had been a staff officer during the First World War, and the strategies of that era still dominated his outlook. He believed that infantry still reigned supreme on the battlefield. He discounted the idea that tanks, on their own, could breach a continuous line of defense. As the lessons of the Polish campaign were pondered, he confidently asserted that his forces could contain and cut off any possible breakthrough by Panzers. Gamelin's passive strategy infuriated France's new Prime Minister, Paul Renault, who called him a nerveless philosopher. Twice in April, and again on the very eve of the German invasion, he tried to have Gamelin dismissed. However, each time the general's political supporters had stepped in to save him. France's fate would now rest in his hands. Germany had mustered 136 divisions for its assault on France. No more than a third were fully experienced and equipped, and these would all be committed in the attack's first wave. In spite of Blitzkrieg's reliance on mobile forces, the army was far from being entirely motorized, and had only 120,000 tanks. Many of its guns still had to be horse-driven.
Guns meaning artillery pieces.
Germany lacked the military and industrial resources for a long war. It needed swift victories. Blitzkrieg provided the method by which such victories could be secured. It required the close cooperation of all arms, especially between the Army and Air Force. To achieve this, Luftwaffe ground crews accompanied the Panzer divisions to help coordinate air and ground attacks. At the war's outbreak, the Luftwaffe was Europe's largest and most powerful air force. Its planes were deployed in semi-autonomous fleets, the aerial equivalent of Panzer divisions. The Luftwaffe largely functioned in sophisticated army support, typified by such planes as the highly effective Stuka dive bomber. Because most of its planes were short-range, the Luftwaffe needed to occupy and operate in captured enemy airfields. Over 4,000 Luftwaffe planes would take part in the Battle of France, giving it a numerical superiority almost 2 to 1 over the Allied air forces. By May 1940, German Panzer strength stood at over 2,500 machines. Individually, the German tanks held no clear advantage in either armor or firepower, but their deployment in armored divisions guaranteed them battlefield superiority at the point of contact. Each armored division included about 240 tanks, as well as supporting vehicles. These divisions would have a decisive and dramatic influence in the coming conflict. The Panzer II was first produced in 1935. It featured a new suspension system using 5 large, independently sprung road wheels. Though heavier than the Panzer I, it was also faster and more powerful. 955 Panzer IIs would be committed in the battle for France, almost half of the Army's total tank strength. Its 20mm cannon was a converted aircraft gun and would be no match for many of the Allied tanks. It was essentially a lightly armed scout tank. The Panzer III was intended as Germany's main battle tank and was expected to make up 75% of an armoured division's strength. It was primarily designed to fill an anti-tank role and was equipped with the same anti-tank gun that was used by the infantry. Problems in development meant that only 350 were available at the beginning of the Western offensive. The Panzer III had 6 small road wheels per side, each independently sprung and torsioned. Very little of its suspension system was exposed to enemy weapons. However, difficulties with rough terrain caused this type of suspension to be abandoned in later models. In 1938, it was decided to upgrade the Panzer III's main gun to 50mm, but this new model was not ready when the offensive began. During the course of the campaign, 40 up-gunned Panzer IIIs were to see action. The Panzer IV was designed as an infantry support tank and equipped with a short, low-velocity gun firing high-explosive shells. It was designed to deal with enemy infantry and anti-tank guns. Its suspension system was a simple bogie arrangement using quarter-elliptical springs. Though first planned in 1935, it wasn't until 1939 that the Panzer IV finally came off the production line. Though intended to make up 25% of an armoured division's strength, the 278 tanks which fought in France constituted only 2% of total German armoured strength. With gun changes, it was to be the mainstay of the Panzer force throughout. The Panzer 38T was originally a Czech tank and had been the mainstay of the Czech army. An excellent, well-armoured light tank, it came into German possession with the occupation of Czechoslovakia in 1939. Over 438Ts took part in the Western offensive. In just 7 years, the German army had grown from 100,000, a figure permitted by the Versailles Treaty, to a grand total of 3.5 million. Of these, 2.5 million would be committed to the Western offensive. A large percentage of German troops were conscripts, drafted from the brown shirts, the police, and elsewhere. By May 1940, the army's morale could not have been higher. To the the earlier bloodless conquests of Austria and the Czechs, they could now add their well-fought victories in Poland and Norway. These campaigns gave the ordinary German soldier complete confidence in his training, equipment, and leadership. The German troops were well paid and received generous home leave, factors which further boosted their morale. Though discipline was strict, relations between the men and their officers were very good, and a strong spirit of comradeship was fostered throughout the army. Alongside the regular army, Germany would field 3 divisions of the Waffen-SS, totaling 100,000 men. It had been founded in March 1939 as the military wing of the Nazi Party's elite SS organization. It had been arranged that should war break out, it would come under army command. Entry standards were rigorous. Out of every 100 applicants, only 7 were accepted. The SS were the first German units to train with live ammunition and to be issued with camouflage jackets. SS divisions were all motorized. Highly organized and fanatically loyal to Hitler, they were intended to be used as shock troops. Although Hitler was intensely proud of being his personal regiments, the Waffen-SS were initially mistrusted by the army, who regarded them as amateurs.
Oh shit, I got that on the wrong side.
However, they fought well in Poland, thereby earning a reputation for courage and discipline. In the battle for France, Germany would field a highly organized and motivated fighting force. By May 1940, 94 French divisions, containing 2.25 million men, were deployed to meet the expected German attack. However, much of their artillery dated from the First World War, and they were dangerously short of effective anti-tank and anti-aircraft guns. French and British tactical doctrine regarding tanks and aircraft lagged far behind the Germans. Both the high commands considered tanks as first and foremost an infantry support weapon. The few French armored divisions formed by 1940 contained only half as many tanks as their German counterparts. Between them, the Allies deployed 3,100 tanks in May 1940, but they were widely dispersed amongst the infantry divisions. As for the French Air Force, it could field only 740 modern fighters and 140 effective light or medium bombers. These were reinforced by 350 aircraft from Britain's RAF, attached to the BEF. The Allied aircraft were dispersed amongst the different areas of the front in just the same way as the armoured forces were. This made it impossible for individual army commanders to obtain a sufficient concentration of airpower at the right moment. This shortcoming would be one of the major factors in the outcome of the Battle of France. The French Army's standard light tank from 1935, the R-35, was used in an infantry support role. 855 R-35s equipped the army in May 1940, making it France's most numerous tank. Extremely slow, it was unsuitable for mobile strategic operations. Like all French tanks, its effectiveness was limited by the fact that its commander had also to act as gunner, loader, and radio operator. was developed in the mid-1930s, the Char B was a formidable weapon with thicker armor than any Panzer. It mounted a 47mm gun in a revolving turret, backed up by a 75mm gun in the hull. Though limited by a short operating range of 85 miles, the Char B could cope with any German tank pitted against it. Like other French tanks, it was poorly deployed by the Army Command. The Matilda II would prove to be the best British tank in the Battle of France. It was one of the earliest tanks to have a hydraulically controlled turret. Designed purely for infantry support, its cross-country speed was little faster than walking pace. The Matilda was the best protected tank of its day, but it suffered somewhat from poor vision and mobility. During the interwar years, the French army was regarded as the most formidable in Europe. By 1939, this reputation no longer stood up to close scrutiny. Throughout the 1930s, equipment had fallen and funding declined due to the depression and large costs of the National Empire. The troops received only 50 centimes a day, compared to a British private's daily allowance of 17 francs. This caused great resentment amongst the French rank and file. Their living conditions were uncomfortable and impoverished. Discipline was lax, with soldiers often neglecting to salute their officers, and even leaving their barracks each weekend without permission. Many of the officers did their level best to secure a posting far behind the lines, away from the dreariness and danger of the front. The winter of 1939 was the coldest in 50 years, making life at the front harsher still. Training and work routines were curtailed, which gave rise to idleness and then boredom. Amongst the BEF, where the officers insisted on keeping their men busy, morale was a good deal better. Their months of waiting were spent improving defence works and completing the training of the recently raised territorial army units. For the French soldiers, however, their army's ingrained defensive strategy added to its inertia and further sapped their fighting spirit. On May the 10th, the French army would go into battle with a fatal mix of apathy and disharmony. By the spring of 1940, there was a widespread belief amongst the French army that the war would be settled by diplomatic agreement, without a shot being fired. On May the 7th, normal leave was restored to the army. By now, relations between Paul Renault and General Gamelin had completely broken down, and on May the 9th, the French premier offered to resign because his government would not let him sack the general. In the wake of the Norwegian disaster, Britain's Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain was also preparing to resign. That same evening, the Luftwaffe informed Hitler the weather on May the 10th will be good. Later that night, the code word Danzig went out to the already alerted German units, signaling that the long-awaited offensive would begin at 05:35 hours. The long-gathering storm was finally about to break.